What's up guys, welcome to the Warp Zone and thanks for checking out my video. My name is Wiggs and today we're going to talk about Monster Hunter Wilds. This game had a ton of hype at its release a little over a year ago. We've gotten all the updates that we're getting leading up to the expansion expected in 2026. So, what does the game look like now that we have the complete version of Monster Hunter Wilds? Does it live up to expectations? Is it worth your money? And more importantly, your time? Let's take a look. So if you didn't know, Monster Hunter Wilds is an action RPG where you are, you guessed it, a monster hunter. Why are we hunting monsters? Probably something to do with the world's economy, or more likely just for that big dick energy because nobody seems to know why. We just do it. Or at least we do now. Wilds released with some terrible performance issues, especially on PC, but patches have largely solved the problem. I get some texture pop-ins on startup now, but that's about it. It took too long to fix these performance issues, but now you can at least get into hunting without worrying that the game's going to crash on you. Speaking of hunts, the core gameplay loop goes, pick a monster to hunt, slay or capture said monster, and use the materials you collect to make items, weapons, and armor. You're also going to get access to a ton of different skills to buff your hunter around your weapons and playstyle. The monsters are very unique, some of them are badass, some are funny, and the controls are tight, which results in some very satisfying wins once you finally take one down. Now the most important thing you're going to craft is your weapons, because they dictate your playstyle. There are 14 weapons, and this is probably some of the best weapon design I've seen in any game. All 14 weapons feel unique, viable, and powerful, while feeling easy enough to pick up and play effectively at a basic level. But even if they look simple on the surface, there is a depth of mastery that can only be achieved over time with each weapon. This is honestly a masterclass in design in my eyes, where I really have a hard time picturing what a 15th weapon would look like, because there's really a weapon for everyone in this game, and all of them are already so unique. You like big hits? Try the Hammer of the Greatsword. You like Attack on Titan? Play Dual Blades. You like axes, swords, and explosions? Why pick one when the Switch Axe combines all three? Or grab yourself a heavy bowgun and fill a dragon full of lead like a real American. As you progress through the game, you're going to get access to more weapons themed around each monster. Some of them lean into pure raw damage, some of them have elements like fire, or status effects like paralysis or poison. Of course, some weapons are better for certain monsters, but on the way to the endgame, everything is really viable. All the weapons progress to max rank, so nothing is truly useless, but more a matter of preference. Now once you're into the late game, weapons unfortunately become more homogenized due to the monster design, the Ardian, and the Gugmazios weapons, which is made even worse by the insane amount of RNG in this game. Everything that you craft is tied to RNG of the materials that you collect for completing hunts. Now, to the developer's credit, the number of materials required for any particular weapon or armor piece is pretty low. Early decoration slots for skills are limited, so the early RNG is not very bothersome. But this becomes more frustrating the deeper you get into the game because while you may not need a lot of materials per upgrade, the highest levels of equipment all require rare, low drop materials, so you may be fighting a particular monster a lot. I fought the Lagiacrus over 30 times just to get 6 of its rare drops. Now the Ardian and Gugmazios weapons might be the worst offenders in this RNG system. They're the strongest weapons available, and not only are you subject to RNG for the crafting materials, but each weapon can be upgraded further with skills from a randomly generated table for that specific weapon type. Basically, each weapon type has a randomized chart of skills where the first weapon, second weapon, third, and so on that you craft are gonna have predetermined skills tied to them. So if you're trying to get a favorable set of skills, you may actually have to craft 5 or 6 of these things to get the skills that you want. The cool thing about the Ardian and Gugmazios weapons is that they are very customizable. But then almost all of the endgame monsters are weak to the same element, so you're really just incentivized to make weapons with that particular element, or make a pure damage weapon, which strips away the customization. Now given how much you need to put into these weapons to make one, that's probably a good thing, but it does make switching weapons harder if you want to try something new at the highest levels of the game. Now I don't really like how much RNG is in this game, but the gameplay and the monster design is so good that in my 150 hours of playing, it hasn't really bothered me until I started grinding for particular items in my last 20-ish hours of playing the game. What did bother me though was how this game approaches its story. Monster Hunter has never really been a story-driven game, and I appreciate what they tried to do here, especially since they clearly put a lot of effort into the story. Previous games like World and Rise would let you do maybe 2 to 3 hunts, then hit you with some dialogue or a cutscene. Never really anything spectacular, but it was a nice reward for progression. Wilds, however, gives you cut scenes, plural, after every single hunt throughout the low rank. Now each hunt took me around 15 to 25 minutes depending on which one, but in between it felt like those cutscenes lasted like 20 minutes at least. And most of them unfortunately are not very interesting, so it feels even longer. In the story, you're the hunter for Avis Unit. and along with your handler Alma and your blacksmith Gemma, you help a boy named Nata find his home and, I guess, save the world. However, it focuses very heavily on the world itself, and the characters are really just kind of there. There's no real backstories given, some characters just get dropped, potential storylines are ignored, but damn do you learn a lot of history. Focusing on the world itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think there's just too much story throughout the low rank. Because once you beat the big bad monster of the story, the frequency of the cutscenes drops dramatically. They still focus on the world heavily, but the scarcity makes them a lot more appreciated and interesting. If you want to have a lot of story in a game like this one does, there needs to be some attention to the characters, I think, so that players actually have some kind of reason to get invested. Gemma and Alma are in almost every cutscene, but I can really only remember one instance where we actually got a hint of Gemma's past. This feels less like a team and more like 3 people that are just together. I don't want to say that the game gets good after 10 hours because that's not true. The hunts are always a blast. However, the game gets a lot better once the story just moves out of your way. Coincidentally, that also happens roughly 10 hours in, and given how little time was actually spent with the story in my 150 hours of playtime, it's worth persevering through, and who knows, you might actually enjoy the story unlike I did. Now, given how much the story focuses on the world, it thankfully introduces the biomes well, and each of them are fantastic. Now there's only 5 locations, but the story is going to introduce their inhabitants and the history, sometimes in too much detail. Monster Hunter has always kind of had this less is more approach to their locations, and this time around, locations are huge, detailed, and alive. So even though you're going to go to the same 5 locations for all of your hunts, you're still going to feel variety due to the size, day-night cycles, and how certain monsters influence the whole region. Back before this game released, a lot of people were speculating that this was going to be an open world game, which unfortunately it's not. It's still instance-based like the previous games, but the base camp hubs are located within the biomes themselves rather than their own instances. So, if you're at the desert hub, you can seamlessly start a hunt in the desert and go track down your monster. Each biome is also going to have monsters wandering around so that you don't actually have to start a hunt with Alma, you can just go fight a monster, which gives me hope that a true open world Monster Hunter is on the way. So at release, there was a lot of talk that this game was too easy, and if you played Monster Hunter World or Rise into the End game at all recently, then yes, this game was easy on release in comparison. Originally, I think high ranks only went to about 7-star difficulty, and I even sidelined my Palico when I was at this point in the game, but things have really escalated since the title updates came out. We have 9 and 10-star tempered and arch-tempered monsters now, and these things will really test you. Omega in particular is one that I am still trying to solo. If you played Monster Hunter World back in the day, Wilds has kind of followed the same progression pattern, being relatively easy until the tempered and arch-tempered variants came out, so criticism at release was accurate, but I think the original difficulty level was also expected. I think Wilds has a great difficulty curve for introducing new players to the game that escalates to a point where new hunters will face difficult but rewarding challenges to overcome, and veterans will still feel challenged by the tempered and arch-tempered variants. So does this game live up to expectations, and is it worth your resources? I think at release, this game was actually a disappointment due to the lack of endgame content and, more importantly, the performance issues. If it released in the state it is now though, I think it would receive a lot of praise. So what that means for you now is that this is a great time to get into or back into Monster Hunter Wilds, maybe even the best time to do so. Whether you've been a fan of the series for a long time, waiting for a good time to buy, or the series looks interesting and you've never tried a Monster Hunter game, this game is well worth its full price, and if you pick it up on sale, it's an absolute steal. It's a great game that I've had a lot of fun with, and I'm excited to sink another 150 hours into. Thank you for checking out my video, and thank you for staying until the end. Please consider liking and subscribing so that you can catch my next review. If you're thinking of picking up the game, or are an active hunter and agree or disagree with something I've said, please let me know in the comments, and I hope to see you in the wilds.